I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will begin with the roll. Spoke to the here, and I can see. Mark. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Mark Powell, here.
Scott,
Here.
Aaron,
Here.
Peter,
Here.
Lee, here, Linda,
Here.
Elizabeth,
Here.
Dan, here. Okay. That's all right, perfect timing. And Emily, are you here?
Here.
Okay. Okay, the first order of business is to approve the minutes of the 5th. I would welcome a motion, or if people actually, do people have some comments? I have one. But does anyone else
I
have?
submitted a change to you, but.
Linda also submitted a small administrative change to me.
Okay, and I also need to assign somebody S. Please, with somebody who might take that. Oh, thank you, Linda. Okay, and then the only comment that I have is when Ms. Hughes responded to I think it was in response to the question about the comprehensive permit on the second. Page two. I thought it might be helpful to just, she elaborated a little bit about that it's partially to do with the safe harbor status, if I recall correctly.
I don't know what's.
This is the context is responding, the developer could do that. The question was, Mr. Smith asked if the developer could approach DCAM with a 40B comprehensive permit proposal. And my recollection was that part of the discussion included a comment about that we're currently in safe or will be in safe harbor for.
We currently are in safe harbor and that any comprehensive permit would have to be a friendly 40B through the select board.
Okay, and I mean, if people feel that it's clear enough, then we don't have to make this change, but that's what caught my eye. So,
Okay.
all right. Okay, so I would accept a motion to approve as comments received.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, we have to do a roll call. So, I mean, as the table goes around, I go around the table again. Scott?
Yes.
Yeah, Aaron,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Emily,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Dan, and yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. The next order of business is, I believe, if I can get to my agenda sometime. Well, we'll talk about future meetings. Everyone is aware that our next meeting, a little bit out of sequence, we're gonna do a meeting. We've all agreed that we're gonna do one on the 26th, next Monday. And then the one following that will be on the 9th. DCAM's meeting, their first public outreach meeting is on the 12th at 7 o'clock at night at the townhouse in the public hearing room. And it will also be broadcast via Zoom. We have an update on some conversations we've had at DCAM, which we'll do a little bit later. We'll approve the minutes, and so we are on to a town staff update, and I see my.
That's a quick question.
Sure.
There were a number of invites for 4 to 5:30. Is that? Am I making that up?
I didn't think I sent them from 4 to 5:30, but I can check on that.
I saw that previous at one point. I didn't see this.
If that's a non-thing, then
Okay, I'll double check the invites.
Sorry, Megan.
Okay, hi everyone, Megan Widow, Deputy Town Manager. I have a pretty brief update today, but I'd like to start by just kind of explaining some of the materials you have in front of you. When our staff group was meeting to talk about this exciting project, we were thinking about, we did compile a number of documents and information, and if any of you would like me, I might have gotten you might have been looking at it, or it might have been buried in your inbox. So that, we wanted to kind of raise that up, for some of the things that we put together to make sure you know what's in this folder. And so it includes some case studies, information, on prison reuse in other areas. It has some of our planning documents all in one place, and Shannon, put that in a folder. And, can also send it around again if that's helpful. So just to let you know that that's available, and I think it's probably a good home for. We can continue to add information there, if there's other things that come up, especially if, this group is gonna be working towards a ULI study. There's a lot of materials that will be needed to work through that one. And there's a document in here that I think came from, our staff that is a general list of some materials, the types of things you would need to pursue, a ULI, partnership. And I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting, I know it came up a little bit, but no matter how this group decides to proceed, it's helpful to know the list of items that are typically included, because that's a lot of the work is getting familiar with you know, the maps and the historical information. So I just wanted to offer that here, and thank you, Shannon, for putting them together. So I think really the next piece here, as part of my update, is just to share that there is a team of town staff. That's made up of a few people here in the room. Shannon, we have Elizabeth Hughes, our town planner, Anita Graney, economic vitality. We also meet with our communications manager, our risk and compliance staff person, and public works director on a regular basis. And we've been spending some time thinking about the different bodies that are thinking about this project, and there's so many, but right now we're thinking about, okay, we have DCAM, we have this advisory committee, we have the select board, and also town staff, and how are we all working together to achieve you know, some different goals, but some of the same goals, and how are we pooling resources together to make sure that we're all achieving what we're supposed to be doing. And so it's kind of coming ahead right now with this public forum coming up, or public hearing coming up in September 12th. And so I wanted to think about how town staff and can be supportive of your group here in thinking about what resources we need to achieve your charge, and also think about how the work you're going to be doing integrates with what DCAM is doing. That's on our mind a lot too. I think we don't want to be in a position where a member of the public is thinking, am I gonna go to the DCAM meeting or the advisory committee meeting? I mean, I think public outreach is so critical here, and people's time is limited. And so just thinking about how we're really integrating the two efforts so that the community feels heard and understood, but not out every night of the week, I think, with all the other things going on. So I'm curious to hear your conversation today about the September 12th meeting and your thoughts on participation, and how me and my team can be supportive in that effort. So I think that's it for me today. We don't have really news on the wastewater treatment. That's, you know, still being worked on. Right now, I think on the staff side of things, we're thinking the first opportunity to discuss this really in earnest with the public is September 12th. And so we've been working with DCAM on the logistical side of things, and I know the agenda is still evolving, but we're happy to host it here in the townhouse, and we're hoping we get a really good turnout. So we're gonna set up the hybrid version too, so people can tune in doing other things. So I think that's it for me, Dan.
Excellent, thank you, and I very much appreciate the you and Shannon pulling those materials together in one place. That's very helpful. Okay, so the next item is planning for the public outreach and DCAM meeting on September 12th. As Megan indicated, we did have a conversation with Abby and with Paul and Taylor, actually, I believe it was. And in anticipation of the meeting, and what we basically, they explained to us what, the items that they wanted to cover in the initial meeting. Which had, if I can remember correctly, in all the details, generally speaking, they're gonna do this same kind of high level overview of the project that they did for us. They're going to talk about, their, generalized process going forward and explain that there will be, multiple meetings, for, at least 3 for the public to give input. Their plan is to get an agenda to us sometime this week. So that we can, add our piece to it. There will be an opportunity, I believe we decided Mary is going to, speak about the role of, our group, the AB. And there's an opportunity for us also, if we feel prepared, to do a couple of minutes or so, just to sort of explain how we see it. And I say that because I think we're gonna be ready, and part of our conversation today is to focus on creating subcommittees, which I think would be a great thing to share with the public, so that they understand how we're sort of organizing and dividing up the work. And then one of those committees, if you had a chance to look at it, includes a sort of communications and a community outreach group. So my hope is by the end of today, maybe we can figure out who's going to be on which committees, and then we could have use the intervening 2 weeks or so, or I guess it's almost 3 to prepare for that. So, Scotty, would like to have a question.
I'm just curious, how could we sort of develop a list of subcommittees when we're not exactly sure how we align and integrate with DCAM, what their needs are? I mean, is it premature to be looking about subcommittees at this point, so we know a little bit more about our role?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think what we attempted to do, and Patrick and I spent some time going back and forth, and you can see it on the minutes. The first time we announced it, it was more items. And what we attempted to do, what I attempted to do, is to sort of consolidate them. And so I think that, and this is certainly up for discussion with the group, I think we have broad enough categories that will allow us to navigate that. If we determine that we don't, we can certainly add. There's nothing in stone right now. But I think my sense is they're broad enough and generic enough that we can fit things into them. So that's the whole, I understand your concern, and it's one, as is often the case in development and construction projects. I know you know this. It's not oftentimes, it's not linear. And so what we need to do is to sort of put stakes in the ground and start the work. And I think that's what we're attempting to do.
I just want to make sure we're not going off on a tangent with a committee and we're not aligned with, and DCAM might be already doing this, and how is that subcommittee? Are we collaborating with them, or are we
Yes.
doing off on 2 different?
No, I think I can answer that question. And I appreciate you following up with that. So what we're doing now is the DCAM folks, with Mark's sort of understanding, and I think Megan's understanding as well, has invited me to attend. They're doing bi-weekly, is that right? It's bi-weekly meetings where they do exactly what you're talking about. This is sort of coordination. What are they worried about? What are we worried about? How do we sort of march down the road, avoid as much as possible the overlap? And I'm particularly enthused about that because I think I'm concerned exactly like you are about it. And I'm not concerned that people don't want to be doing the right thing. I'm more concerned there's a lot of moving parts fast. And how do I feel comfortable sitting here and saying, I think we got this, or I'm a little anxious about this and we need to put a little more time into it. So one of my, not to get out in front of myself, but one of my thoughts is to really reinforce this is to put myself in the position or put myself on the project management. And a piece of that is a sort of rapid response and timeline. so that hopefully I can stay out in front of that. But that's what I have to offer you today.
That's good. Thank you.
Maybe dovetailing off of that a little bit, and I apologize because I missed the last meeting, but as we think about DCAM presenting to the town and what Mary may plan to say, like what is our relationship with DCAM? Are we partners? Are we, overseeing what they're doing? Are we working, like against, not against each other, but do we have compete, like, so that to me is like, as I think about this, and when people ask me for an update on what's going on, it's not really clear to me like what our relationship is with DCAM and how we're working together.
Yeah, so, sure,
So. DCAM obviously has a responsibility of disposing of the site on behalf of the state. We have a responsibility for establishing what our community wants to see happen at that site and communicate that to DCAM in a way that what they ultimately package up in an RFP looking for redevelopment of the property aligns nicely with what the community actually wants to see happen at the site. And so the discussions have been very sort of interleaving, recognizing that what we're doing is we have an opportunity to influence and discuss and guide how that request for proposal actually lands. And so the reason that the select board put this group together was because we wanted to make sure that we had a really focused effort from our community. And so I think of, Megan was referring to this, we have staff doing some really important things like, details of the engineering of the wastewater treatment facility, some really low level stuff. But there's some very logical phases that are going to occur. There's going to be some visioning, some investigation, some understanding of the current state. And then there's going to be some planning that tries to begin to bring into focus what we want the future state to look like. And then there's going to be this very specific exercise of rezoning that the town has control of. So we can think about it in those three phases, and we're very much at the early stages of the investigatory phase. And just to put a little bit more color on, so what's going to happen at the September 12th meeting is probably a combination of two things. There's going to be some outline of what DCAM typically does when they're disposing of property, just to communicate that to a lot of members of our community who haven't looked at it as much as we have already. So we have to recognize that we're going to bring the public along to a better level of understanding, even as we continue to sort of push the boundaries of what we really know. And there's going to be some information about what's there. People have been driving by those walls for years and don't know what's inside of there, and just, the basics and information of what is back there, what's going on there at the moment, when can we expect things. Some of those questions about the past and the present are going to come up as they begin to outline what that visioning, which hasn't really taken place yet, but we all want to get to, is going to be next.
yeah, and if I can just build on that a little bit more, thank you. If I can just build on that a little bit, one of the important things we talked about from my perspective is just like, I felt like we began to realize that at the last meeting, this has a long fuse.
Mhm.
And I think communicating that to the public, the town residents, is important so that they don't feel like this is gonna happen, it's imminent. And it's not that we don't need to be on top of it for sure, but I felt like that would be really important for people to hear. So
Who's moderating the actual?
well, I know that the director is coming, but I don't.
Yeah, so in some ways, again, the legislature decided that there was going to be an engagement meeting by DCAM in 45 days. September 12th turns out to be day 45 of that clock. So they sort of need to have a meeting. I would say in general terms, though, what we've discussed is that it will make sense for them to be the host and of some meetings and then this one, because in particular, because they have to have a meeting. But it will also make sense, I think, and we need to talk about this as a group in terms of engagement, for those meetings to sometimes be hosted by other groups, like this group, for example, in our community. So while they have to have 3 meetings, we can have as many as we want, and those can be hosted by whoever we think is the best person to be on point. But we put together this team specifically to try to get that engagement going.
Right, so,
I have
Yeah.
I'm just curious if this is where you're headed to, but, a really important, observation from conversation with the cameras. Because they are, regulated by the legislation, they have to follow a certain protocol. And whereas when we start to get into visioning, and I could easily imagine a much more interactive part, they aren't necessarily allowed to do that.
okay,
And so we, to my point, I think we really want that flexibility.
yeah,
Because
I mean, it's.
I don't,
Yeah, it's not exactly, I mean,
Okay.
here's what I'm thinking. You show up at a public hearing, we're the board appointed to be the kind of experts on this. I don't feel like we have our hands around any of this at all, so. You show up, you've already seen what's coming out in the paper. We should do this beautification to the site. We should, it's unrealistic because people don't understand what's going on. So there's informing, if we're talking seriously about informing the public, then I think there needs to be some unbiased informing of the public. What the legislation says, what the select board has decided is gonna happen, because clearly the select board and DCAM have decided that this is gonna go to proposals. What that means, what, you know, I feel a little bit like we should be the people in control, and I'm a little disappointed that we're not the people who are first having a vision to put out there that is fine to be criticized by the rest of the community or shaped, but to come in having no idea, I think is gonna really waste a lot of time, to be honest. So I am worried in terms of who is moderating, that the overall framework isn't gonna be detailed enough or transparent enough about what's going on or unbiased enough that people are gonna have a real understanding.
okay, and I think, this conversation today, right now, you may or may not be able to see Paul and Abby are both on. And so in our.
From the town's point of view too, though.
Yeah, okay, so from our conversation with them, there was an expectation that we would discuss this today, and we'll continue to refine it. I think that's why we don't have an agenda today from them. I think we wanted the benefit of that input. This input,
I
sorry.
mean, and I don't know what's within the jurisdiction of DCAM to provide, but maybe it's your suggestion. I think we talked about this before, like. Here's a sheet of paper that says like the 10 factual things that are going on, right? Just, you know, and maybe here's like. What we can't opine on right now. It's not necessarily gonna stop the town from asking questions and sharing ideas, but. Just, I think, to lay out sort of the facts that we know, the time, the process, whatever, I think would be a really good way to set the stage and save. Questions.
Yeah, and I think in broad strokes, I think we wanna. Communicate what the timeline is and that this thing is not gonna happen imminently. I think we want to communicate that we are working collaboratively with DCAM. And to the degree that we can start to lay out a process for trying to tackle our work. And the reality is we have a lot more information to investigate and to digest, and the town is working pretty diligently, town staff is working pretty diligently to all that. So.
I think to build a little bit what Elizabeth said, I think the optics of this meeting will be really important, like it's the first time there's been a public. Like session for this, and having DCAM come up and do their part, and I know we're still forming our relationship with DCAM. And then having a whole separate thing that's like the town and this group may not be as what we want to portray, like even though we're like starting to work together as a group and we're working with DCAM. I think it would be great if there was more of a united, like, we're forming this relationship and make that clear, but we're like in the process of that and have some kind of sharing of responsibilities of hosting the meeting, even if DCAM is providing the majority of the content. Have that kind of be more shared and more sort of collaborative in our approach.
So I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question. So to accomplish that, do you think we need to be a little bit more cautious or just be clear that we're just in that early stage, or do you think we need to advance our
I
progress?
mean, I think it could start with either Mary or someone from the town kind of starting the meeting and kind of bringing, like introducing DCAM, having them kind of join, like having the town kind of feel like we're starting the meeting versus DCAM as a, started this whole process. And then maybe introduce the board and like kind of, explain the players, explain where we've gotten to. I like this idea about the things that are true, 10 facts kind of thing, because obviously we've all seen the things in the paper, like why can't we be on the site and things like that, like. The Department of Corrections still owns the site, it's not part of anyone's purview at this, like, things like that, I think would be really helpful to kind of explain pretty early. I think the sort of high level overview that was laid out, I think makes sense, like, we're trying to get people aware of just what's going on and what's there, and that makes sense for our very first meeting, but just kind of the start of the meeting feeling like it's much more of a collaborative piece rather than, DCAM presenting and we're on the side or something.
Okay, I think that's great. Don?
Yeah, correct me if this understanding is off base, but this isn't only the first session, it's also 1/3 of the town's total opportunity to provide input to DCAM. And my worry is that if we treat this as a very preliminary, just the beginning of the process, that we will have missed our window by the end.
So,
Yeah,
I just point out that. The people that we've been talking to, Abby and Paul, have made it really clear that 3 is the minimum required in the legislation, and there is an expectation that there will be more, certainly more than that, and however many we need based on the progress that's being made, so I wouldn't quite go all the way to that.
Well, I worry that it gets away from us.
Yes, yeah, the point's well taken, I just don't think I would frame it that way.
all right. Anyone else have any comments on it? They want to?
I'm just curious, will we have an opportunity at either of our next 2 meetings to get more information? I know you said they were going to provide an agenda, but on the 9th, could they actually give us some sense of the actual presentation so that we could comment on it for their benefit?
I think that's a very reasonable request, and I think it's my expectation, hope that we would in fact see it for our next meeting, the agenda. And then we have a chance to talk about it.
And then, sorry, I apologize, you were also going to add something, or Mary is just gonna speak?
So what we talked about doing was Mary was going to do sort of along the lines of what Aaron discussed. That's my understanding of how this is gonna go. And then in the discussion of it, we talked about would we be ready? Do we want to say something? She's going to at least say who we are, introduce us, and what our charge is. I would love, personally, I would love to be in that position, because I think I share a lot of the group's concern about optics and also your progress. So, and that's partially what I'm hoping to at least begin that, give us some clarity about, all right, who's gonna take this and run with it a little bit over the next week or so, or 2.
We do have the bulk of 3 meetings to get there. Between today, next Monday, and 2 weeks from now.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and the fact that we have a meeting, so, oftentimes because of our frequency, it's just a matter of sharing information, catching up. It's hard to do work. And so my hope is that between today and next Monday, we'll be able to share some of the thoughts.
And I think going back to the concept that you and Patrick developed around subcommittees, one of the advantages of doing that would be that I think as a group, we have an opportunity to detail some people to go off and work on something specific related to that and come back, so we don't have to all, whatever it is, 13 of us get together in this format and work that. So that's another opportunity that for this work and for other work, I think we should take.
I agree. Any other comments? All right, so, I don't know if others heard, originally, Patrick is learned that he had to travel.
Just one question in terms of the optics, which I think we're all agreeing is very important. Perhaps we could have shared letterhead with DCAM and the town on the agenda so that it presents as a collaborative effort.
I mean, I'll be the person that disagrees with it, because I still think we're advocating for the town, and yes, we're working with DCAM, but we're representing the town. So I may lose that fight, but I disagree with, I think the optics should be that we're representing the town and that we're working with DCAM, but.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can be honest that this is the beginning of our relationship with DCAM. We haven't gotten a real close collaborative working environment yet. But that's our goal, so.
Okay. So the next item is a discussion of ULI involvement, which is identified as one of the incorporated into one of the supplements. So do you want to sort of tell us some of your thoughts? And I have discussed this with a few other people.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think, I think the beauty of the TAP and the ideal time frame for engagement with the technical assistance panel is sort of in these early days, like before we sort of solidify the direction we want to go, right? We don't need ULI to sort of confirm what we want. We want to throw out a ton of ideas and have the expertise of the ULI TAP panel figure out what's feasible, what's not, what will benefit the town's bottom line the most, what won't. You know, how do we incorporate all the sort of various demands of the community as a whole? So I think, you know, really my hope was that the September 9th meeting, ULI could come in, they could sort of lay out high level how they do these things, at what time do they want to, you know, their timing of wanting to get involved. Which from my conversations with them really is sooner rather than later, right? I think they want to take sort of the tidbits from community engagement, create those, you know, then we want to bring those back to the TAP to create ideas together, and then they can help us sort of fine tune the direction we want to go. I do think, you know, as we're talking about our job really is to, you know, we're advocates for our town. I know that, I think that DCAM was considering a ULI for a TAP or engaged in some capacity. I don't know much more than that. But I would argue sort of, you know, are goals aligned? I'm not sure, right? So I think we want to engage ULI for a TAP sort of on behalf of the town on an independent basis.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that DCAM couldn't be invited.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to sharing everything. I just think we really want to drive the process.
And have you worked with them before?
So I serve as the treasurer of the Boston District Council for ULI. My tenure there is coming to an end. I specifically have not been involved on a TAP before.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
it's a wonderful experience because you bring in experts from the real estate construction to
Local.
local.
Well, you can do either. Right?
Yeah, and they sit and listen to, all of us listen to DCAM, us talk about the history of the project. Concord, the history of the West Concord, master planning that's going on, the site, everything about it, what we want, you know, kind of where we're thinking, what stage we are at it. What's available, where it is currently for zoning, the whole, just the gamut of the whole project, you're updating them on all aspects of it, and what you're kind of what we're kind of all trying to get out of it. We're not telling them how to design it.
Yeah.
We're just telling them what's possible, and then they go forward. Depends on what we commit to, but my thought was more full day. And, you know, they probably walk the site, they come back here and talk to everybody else, And then they just gather and brainstorm for like probably 6 hours. And people are watching, you're using the expertise of each of the individuals in real estate design. And they're putting together a sort of like some initial thoughts for what could possibly happen.
So I'm curious, for both of you guys, that sounds incredibly helpful. It also strikes me that the value of that is pretty weighted on them having advanced access to some of this information as opposed to trying to digest that. And maybe I'm underestimating what they're capable of doing. But if that would, I would see that as a challenge. I would also, we would need to have our goals pretty clear going into that, even if it's a high level goal set, which we've talked about, and it is one of the subcommittees, but.
You get goals, but you don't give them too narrow of a guardrail, because you want them to be creative and the blank canvas to them. We give them what our goals are, but not try to steer what they're going to come up with.
And I think like if I know I think we shared the application, there's some questions on the application. I think that's where sort of the real sort of heavy lifting out of the gate is, right? For us to really say, okay, and it says present 3 questions. I think usually you're presenting a question and there might be 6 or 7 categories under that question, right? But I think that's where the real work for our committee comes in from the community outreach we've done so far. And sort of to really outline sort of those questions to help sort of direct the discussion. So I think the application is super important. The other thing worth mentioning is I think that ULI goes through a very thoughtful process to make sure that they're creating an unbiased panel. So, right, they're not the panel's not full of developers that want to come in and, benefit from the site, right? So they're very thoughtful about making sure that the construct of the panel is unbiased.
And is it, hang on a second here, is it also, a process approach? In other words, a roadmap for achieving what it is? Is that part of the conversation and understanding how we do our work, how Concord and how this particular group is structured to do it? Or is it more, here's a project, we're gonna tell you some, things that, some possibilities, some.
Here's how it's structured between us and DCAM, and this is the framework for this is the history, this is what's potentially here. And you're giving them, we're giving them the information and they're going forward and putting together some thoughts and reports and some schematics of master planning ideas and thoughts, and then they present, do the full presentation to all of us and DCAM.
Okay, so it sounds sort of like a planning charrette. It sounds a little less process oriented from.
Yes, those processes.
And Peter, you're nodding. Did you have experience with it?
Yeah, no, I would agree with staff's assessment, and we've used it out of Devon's with mass development to think through what was missing and what we needed to attract. And it only took us 5 years to get the local brew pub in place, but it was well worth the wait. But, I just wanted to raise, we have Miss Corneal on the
Yes.
online, and she had sent a letter that we got late this morning, and I wondered if people hadn't seen it yet, but she had some concerns with the ULI TAP process and it being, and was sort of making an argument that having a consultant might be a better way to do it. And what I'm hearing is we need to provide good community input to the ULI TAP process, and that's always the case with any community participation. And I don't think we've got a lot at this point. So if we're talking 2024, maybe we should be thinking about the spring to have them come in once we've got some of that input from the community on the table.
I was wondering if as part of this, whatever 12th meeting, if we would announce or provide some link where I'm sure there's gonna be like a question answer period where everyone's gonna tell us what they want. And then maybe there's also a link to like go to this form, Google form or whatever, and fill in your ideas for the site, and that would be a way that we could gather some more information from folks in the town.
You better be very careful,
Yeah,
because
right,
you're making me think that you have a lot of very good ideas like this, so, no, and I mean, I would welcome that.
But
I agree with you.
I think we need some way for people to, I mean, I'm sure they can email us, but like start contacting us with some of their input. So that, and, you know, I don't know if that's a portion of this 12th meeting, or if it's just, kind of opening the door for that to start happening at a future meeting, but,
I'll make the comment that it's a little bit of both. One, so awkwardly or just by happenstance, in order for it to be the kind of meeting that the legislature has required DCAM to do, there has to be an element of the public speaking in microphones and talking to them. I think that it's unlikely in one evening we're gonna get anywhere near as much of that as we wanna get. So I think we'll have to come back to it as well. That is critically important, though, that we don't lose the input that we're already getting, have gotten, and will continue to receive, and that's something that I think we need to talk deeply about in school.
Yeah, and that, sorry, that just, that forum or whatever mechanism it is that you're referring to, I think that's key, because I don't know some people, but for me, I can wake up in the middle of the night and say, wow, right?
is there a vehicle that the town has used for other input? That like some online software or something that we can
I look to these.
easily deploy quickly, I don't know, like, I don't like. Just as a way of like giving people a place to like enter.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't do a Microsoft form. Everything we use is through Microsoft, but that's just like a Google form.
Yeah.
And you know, that can be made
Yeah, I don't know if
pretty
it's, I
easily.
don't know if it's just a simple like text box, fill in your whatever information, or if there's any more pointed questions that we want people to think about, but.
When we were doing the master plan, there was a process to, provide input, just online to a specific, website that we're able to gather the information. Elizabeth probably has more details on it.
Well, we've done both, and we've done surveys, obviously, on the MCI. Communities. I'm sorry, the MBTA communities input process last year contained a number of those methods. And I think that it's important for us to design something for this project. That kind of incorporates a number of those elements.
It just seems important to have something quickly, like,
Mhm.
we may wanna work with a consultant at some point to do something more pointed, I remember the whole West Concord thing, but. If there was even just something a little bit more short term than that helps.
Okay.
I just want to go back to Peter's point. So Peter, your point and Jan's letter, I mean, I haven't worked in the ULI tab, so that's an option, and the other option is. Hiring direct consultants, and your point was that we're not gonna have enough information, I just didn't have.
Yeah, my point was, we're not gonna have enough information to do the ULI tab. Maybe this fall, but maybe
Yeah.
this spring might be more
Mhm.
appropriate timing.
And I don't think I see it as only ULI or only a consultant, I think we could do the ULI process and then still hire a consultant to help specific. Approach to our vision, but
I would tend to agree.
yeah. I mean, I think we're gonna need.
And that's where my interpretation of her letter was more of like. Her recommendation seemed a little more prescriptive, right? Whereas the ULI TAP is a little more of a brainstorming session. Let's hone in our ideas. And then, let's work with a specialist to help us effectuate this.
And if we want further clarification, we could ask her.
Yes.
She's welcome.
Well, what time for?
Yeah, we'll have time for it.
Yes, but thank you. Do you-
To the comments about getting public comment, so for the long range plan, we have our consultant that helped with that plan partnered with Co-Organize, who had an online platform to provide comments. It was suited well because the comprehensive long range plan is townwide. People could drop pins and provide comments. So this is a much more focused site and to Shannon's point, I mean, you can do an online form. The problem with public comment, especially with an online form, is having it be useful enough for the committee to be able to pull and distill information from it. You can't, and I would not recommend having an online form that's just a free flowing form, huge, 500 word text box. The time it would take this committee to sift through that information. So really, I mean, we have talked about the possibility of, some type of public engagement or PR type consultant who can work with the committee to figure out how best to beef up the 3 required meetings. I agree with Mark that DCAM is full on board as far as the public process. And as I said at the last meeting, it is up to this committee to get that public engagement, to formulate the vision, to provide that information to DCAM. And DCAM's 100% on board in that public engagement process, but what Linda and I did last year for MBTA communities, is a very small drop in the bucket compared to the community engagement that should be happening with this process.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi everybody. Very sorry to have been late. I feel like I wasn't clear on if we just transitioned kind of from one topic to the other. So sorry if I'm taking us backwards, but where did we land on ULI and what are, like both the timing and then what are the steps that are required for ULI engagement? If you wouldn't mind recapping.
Sure, I can tell you what I heard. I heard questions raised about, well, I heard a very good discussion about what they can bring to the table and what they kind of need. And then I think once we understood what they needed, there was a suggestion made by a couple of board members that it might make more sense to push it further into our process, or our work. And so what I heard is, well, I mean, I don't know that we made a decision about that, but it seems to make sense to me that we would do more of our work and then invite them in.
I guess, contradict that a little bit. I agree, we need more direct feedback from the community. Part of the ULI process is to interview stakeholders as well. I think we've had some a lot of discussion around ULI going around the room, but haven't come to a concise conclusion about it, which is why my proposal is for them just to come to the meeting on the 9th. Present to us, let's ask some questions directly of them. We can share the information we have now, sort of our kind of mission as we think it to be now. And maybe they say, okay, there's some goals here. We need some more from the community, or we need more from X, or hey, we can help you fill in these gaps. Now's the time to engage. So
I would be open to certainly having that conversation, learning more about it, hearing firsthand. So
I'm sure we disagreement that it happens later. I'm thinking it happens sooner because we as a community want to be armed and educated about the possibilities, and they're going to bring out a lot of information. They're going to educate us about that site and what could possibly be done. To wait until spring when DCAM's engage their consultants on the visioning process, and we do a cap after that. I just think it's be probably better sooner than later.
Yeah, and later is a dangerous word. I understand that, but I just feel like I use this in my business life, as the name of my company is now, not right now, right now, but that means it could be tomorrow. So anyway, I hear you, and I think it's I think both.
Is it a kind of a one-time event, or could it be iterative over a number of?
I think we can sort of make it what we need it to be, right? When I first started researching about it, right, it's a 1-day event, or it's a 2-day event, or you do this national panel. But in speaking with Michelle Landers, like we can kind of create what we need to out of it, right? We can sort of have a phase 1 discussion, and then we could revisit, later, or not right now. But when we need to. So I think getting them getting them in here so we can really understand the lay of the land. I mean, they have already had discussions with DCAM. You know, mass development, I was at a dinner, you know, they are engaged with ULI on this, they're aware of what's going on the site, like everyone in sort of the real estate community has eyes on this site, so my sense is that they already have sort of some thoughts as to how to compile the best.
Okay.
Would have set of information.
So it's a suggestion and maybe a bad idea, but it strikes me that the DCAM meeting on the 12th is their statutory requirement to do whatever the statute says, and their public hearing or public meeting or however it's described, lay out whatever they're gonna lay out, and there'll be, I'm sure, some limited opportunity for the public to speak, which I'm guessing will leave a lot of people wanting a lot more than they're gonna get out of that meeting. So one suggestion is that we have our own meeting shortly after that, you know, within 30 days or so, where we can say, all right, DCAM showed us their presentation, this is what we all heard, some of you had an opportunity to comment. We're still getting up to speed, but let's hear what everybody else has to say today. We can start that with kind of, here are some big picture ideas or whatever else the public has to say, kind of our kickoff meeting for public comment. And then try to narrow that a little bit, that might help frame a ULI process, whether that's multi-phase or other. But I think most importantly, to really allow the community to speak, when I think they might feel really handcuffed just by listening to what DCAM has said.
I think it's a great,
I agree with,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important actually for every session that we have with the public, for there to be a clear next session and what that's likely to lead to. So I'm just supporting that idea, and I think that it's a good thing to establish in the first place.
Especially since it's not our meeting.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could have a meeting within a meeting kind of thing, or whatever, we just need to allow them to have the meeting that they need to have.
Right.
But I think that it's very important at this stage, especially, that it be clear to the public when the next opportunity is gonna be and kind of what that next opportunity is gonna be. The sooner we can figure out some kind of overarching timeline, or at least steps so that we can do a you are here in the process for the community, I think the better. Because people do wanna know, and they get anxious if they feel like they don't have an answer to that.
Or that they don't feel like they can be heard.
Right.
right, and that's what I took from you, it's kind of like this idea of you get one chance to make a first impression. And we want that impression to be, we're here to listen.
Yeah.
So DCAM can make their first impression and we can make our own first
Yeah,
impression.
exactly.
Okay, Mary, had your hand up?
I do, thank you, Dan. I just wanted to mention, if you're gonna have the ULI TAP people come in on 9/9, that's a few days before our first public hearing, and I'm wondering if it would be best to maybe wait until after that, for two reasons. We'll be getting more input. Well, I think we'll be more grounded, or maybe we won't, I don't know, but we'll get more input after that. And I think we're gonna still be preparing for that 12, the meeting on the 12th. So I guess I'm a little bit, I'm gonna be speaking, I know we already talked about that, and I wanna make sure that we go in grounded and we go in sync with each other. So I wanna make sure that the meeting we have right before that, we can make sure that we are. I was just wondering if we could delay it until after our first community forum. Just an idea. I know you're in a hurry, and I know you want to get it going soon. I just wonder if waiting a while would be.
But how much time do we have in our next?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I hear you. I guess one question would be, well, would ULI have anything to offer as we head into that meeting with DCAM to help us to prepare, given they've worked with DCAM before? And it was really just an informative session. I mean, I think if we're planning to spend the entirety of the night on preparing for the meeting on the 12th, then
That's my own.
I don't want, what I don't want is the ULI meeting or initial presentation to be like jammed in a 10-second slot and.
No.
That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about yeah, I'm worried about if we put it on the 9th and we still have work to do as far as getting coordinated and again, feeling grounded about how we're going to go out to the community at our trial, our first meeting with the public. I don't want it to be jammed into the corner. So I think we'll have a little bit more breathing time, and I know I would have a more open mind after that, the 12th. So, but it's up to you. It's up to you. It's up to you.
Are you in contact with them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Can you
can
find out
see,
if
so
that's
the
an
meeting,
option?
the following meeting will be the 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
One quick question, is there a legislative requirement for the second meeting with DCAM? In terms of like 90 days or something
Oh,
like?
that's a good.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The other major thing is that they have to file a report some period of time before they actually go out with an RFP, so it's kind of bookended, at least my reading of the legislation.
And that deadline, I think, is in November 25
So it's gonna come up right on us just as quickly as this one.
November
Say that
25.
again?
for the final report. I
Final
think
report.
we targeted it has to be like November 25.
Okay. But not for the second meeting.
No,
Let's see, I was told that there was someone who, I guess Jane, the one that wrote that letter. Well, it's out of order, she wanted I guess she has to jump at one, it's
It's up to you.
if we can be brief, Jane?
Hello there. I don't know, can I turn this on too? No, yeah, video. Well, I'm not sure there's been a lot of discussion. I guess the key thing I would, just from my experience with TAPS, is that they play a very important role when there's very little organization or funding or momentum within the community or expertise. And I just don't, I'm not exactly, I mean, I think it's a great model for sure, but I'm not sure it's the right application for this. But that's, I think, I'm not sure why you wouldn't just hire a consultant and then you can decide later on. You'll probably have more control over who's on the, who's actually part of it. The consultant can help get you prepared with the due diligence, can develop the community engagement process in a more rigorous way. Anyway, that's sort of my perspective, given my experience with ULI TAPS. I've sat on a couple of them and have followed them several times doing planning work with communities.
Okay. Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Quick question, I'm intrigued by Jane's idea, I'm just curious. If you engaged a planning consultant versus the TAP, I'm just thinking of both. You engage a planning consultant, how does that align? I keep on going back, how does that align with the work that DCAM's doing, and will they take? Like our planning consultant comes up with some ideas with the community and us, and then we're going off in this way, and then DCAM's already doing RFPs to visiting, master planners. How do they sandwich?
Yeah, well, I haven't had in-depth conversations, it's a great question, my expectation is they're gonna take the best of all ideas and we're gonna reconcile those and try to convert them into. All right, so Patrick, are you still here? You are. We are a little bit behind, but do you are you in a position to take over the conversation for the charge in the subcommittee assignments?
I don't know if I can take over, but I'll do my best to take us through. I think it's fairly straightforward. As we discussed at our last meeting, I think everyone is in alignment that we should organize into a number of subcommittees to break up the work and get the best use out of the expertise in the room and advance things. So you would have seen in the packet that Shannon shared ahead of the meeting a an initial draft that Dan and I put together to generate a discussion on, how we break up into subcommittees. I would emphasize the word preliminary in this. And so I think there's at least two objectives that we'd like to cover in the next few minutes. One is this group's thoughts on if those are the right committees, and any ideas on how they might be edited or added to. And then the second is if there are recommendations, hopefully for yourselves, but if you want to nominate your colleagues, do so at your own risk, for roles on those subcommittees. I'm happy to if like there are any questions. First of all, hopefully everyone has the subcommittees in front of them
and has had a chance to look at that.
And then, assuming that you do, maybe we start with, are there any kind of questions on why or how we came up with these?
Scott?
I'm sorry, I've got a lot of questions today.
No, it's good. It's
Good, Scott.
Questions are good.
I like the thought process. I'm just curious if you dive into each one of these. I mean, I can see like community outreach is definitely us, project management, yes, we can keep track of our own schedules and what DCAM is doing, doing master planning, all that, but when it comes to like legislation and other things, I mean, I'm just wondering how it dovetails with, again, how does it dovetail with DCAM and what they're doing and whether that's their responsibility, which is ours, and are we just duplicating efforts, that's all.
Okay, and I think that's a great question. I can take a stab at that, Patrick. My thought process and as we assemble these is that these are the different sets of considerations that we're gonna have to deal with. Some of them we're gonna be out front leading, as people have talked about. Some of them are gonna be in the support role. And so you did a great job in your question. You said there's a project management component. That's absolutely true. And then part of that is just this timeline. So we don't all feel like we're constantly chasing, in chase mode. And so I think it's a collection of information. We're not, DCAM has their own sort of timeline for that. We're gonna grab that information, we're gonna plug it in.
Okay, that's why I want, are we sharing information with
Yes.
DCAM that we can put together our own master schedule with all meetings, all events, all milestones, all RFPs, the timing of everything. Will we have access, and are we putting that together, or DCAM put it together and we're adding to it? How does it work?
I think, well, I'm not sure that's written in stone yet, but I would say that, from my perspective, I would see us doing more of the former way, which is collecting the information, putting it together for ourselves, satisfied, because we have our own charge.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm sure DCAM, and so there will be in both directions, information generated and received and integrated.
But it's only as good as the information we got.
Right, and so you're correct, and so there's you think about the league, the town state affairs. That we're constantly these guys are constantly generating information and collecting it, and so we need to be, as I see it, a hub for this stuff and feel comfortable that we're on top of it. And so I can't tell you at this moment what exactly that's gonna look like, but I feel very confident that these are the things that we're gonna have to be concerned about. And so
maybe on this one as well, Scott, to your question, that I think this fourth bullet on town and state, it feels like, and Megan, I don't know if you're in the room, correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like there's already, a communication channel between the town and DCAM. And so effectively, having this subcommittee get into that flow, I think would be fairly efficient, and kind of making that a triangle of information flow, if you will.
One thing, when I spoke with people in Medfield, they had a subcommittee, and it was a DCAM liaison. I know Megan and others are speaking there now a lot, but would it be helpful to have someone like you be a liaison to DCAM?
Yeah, I don't know if just specifically need to say decam under that town and state.
Okay, yeah, so that was my intention, but I think that's a very good idea, to make that very clear.
Oh, right, I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
missed that.
No, I think this is exactly why I want to raise the question, because it's not obvious to people, and I tried to do the same thing with the ULI. You know, I wanted to make sure that that was clear. I mean, it feels like that's the place, this sort of goal setting, master planning, visioning, economic, I mean, we could argue, but that's what I want to hear from you guys. If that's not the right place to park that, then that's what we're trying to figure out. And you know, it's challenging to do what we're doing, and it's because we don't have all the information we need, but we gotta keep on moving it forward. And I'm probably repeating myself on meetings, but I think I want to remind us, because it is a challenge. So, do people does it make more sense to have, sorry.
I just had a question with regard to the, putting in the, sales participation process under zoning, and then legal and zoning. I'm confused. Zoning is different than legislative, and then also the sales process.
There's like the bulleted list, and then there's like
Yeah, and then underneath the list,
other
there's
descriptions.
sort of
They're
different.
broken
Yes,
down.
yes, so.
And, you know, so I'm confused about that, and then in terms of goal setting, we talk also about involving stakeholders, but then you have community outreach, so there's some things that are a little confusing to me in terms of really outlining where the responsibility lies, and then all of these sort of depend on town staff and resources to some extent. And that seems to sort of also be a separate area, but each funnel in with these various, and it's like, how do you keep demands on town staff? Does that go through like the town through Megan, or do you have each committee, say zoning, talking to the planning board about zoning? So I'm not, I know it's kind of gonna end up a matrix, but I'm not sort of seeing that here and how that's gonna be managed.
So I can respond to the Megan question, I believe. She and I talked about having sort of a regular opportunity to avoid and make sure that we're coordinated. So I do imagine that's, or whoever is in that role will be doing that. I think your other observation is absolutely accurate, and I think part of it is, what do we think? Where should these things be? And so, as Patrick mentioned, this was a pass to try to do that, and there is some confusion. I acknowledge that. I'm actually probably the responsible party for that, because I was trying to take a document that was 8 or 10 items and make it work for the narrower, the 5 bullet points. So, but I don't personally, I think this is a great opportunity, either today or between today and the next meeting, to try to think about that. And put things where we think they belong. So.
Yeah, so would you mind articulating the suggestion again?
My suggestion, is that directed to me?
I think it was Linda, was it Linda?
Then,
Oh, I guess there were like a handful of suggestions, but I just think we need some clarification in terms of interaction with town staff across all of these potential subcommittees. And I would also, if you're going to have a clear, uniform communication with the community, then we probably don't want each of these groups having responsibilities for communications.
Mhm.
It should probably just be in a limited group.
Yeah, the third bullet.
Also, the description of zoning is really a description in my mind more of development, and so I was confused. In terms of the title, you know, are we really trying to focus on developing projects or creating zoning to permit development? So I just, there I was unclear. And then in terms of the discussion of financial feasibility, that makes I think, be beefed up if that's gonna be equal in weight to master planning. I mean, but I think they belong together. Then the whole issue of sales participation, and whether that belongs with the group that's doing financial feasibility, I mean, or the group that does legislation, or they have to coordinate, or are we just forgetting altogether to even think about sales participation?
I think it's there.
It's there, but
No, I think it's there because my understanding of it is, it's primarily a blunt instrument. That if we feel that things are beginning to move away from us and we can't work with DCAM or not happy with it, then that becomes a means by which we can bring some control back to it. And so that's why I felt like it belonged more in legal zoning, because what we're gonna attempt to do, as I understood it from our previous conversations, is we're gonna attempt to try to create the incentives and the zoning to create to allow what we want. And, you know, I think that's what Peter did with the work that he did out in Devon's. And I think personally, I think it's pretty successful. And so, Peter at Mass Development and whoever else you want to give credit to. But so that's the sort of lens through which I'm thinking of it. I think you're kind of making the point that I struggle with, which is, and I mentioned it earlier, this is not a linear process. And these categories, when you try to break development into chunks that people can understand, it doesn't fit neatly into boxes. Each piece has a relationship to all the other pieces. It's just the nature of it. And this is really fresh in my mind because I'm trying to teach it. And so so we have a really smart group of people around the table here, and I'd love somebody to sort of say, all right, well, maybe there's somebody put enough thought into it. They could organize it so that they don't have the questions that you're raising or concerns about there being a spillover. And I'm happy to, and I think I can speak for Patrick, we're both happy to organize it in whatever way people think. I felt like when it was further broken down, I mean, at one point, there were 9 categories, or maybe 10, and there's 10 of us. It's not, that's what one person does not make a subcommittee, I think, I don't know, although it'll be easier for open meeting law. I was thinking, great idea, yeah.
But Linda, I think you make a really good suggestion. Sorry, I think I'm lagging. Thank you for the suggestions. I think clear feedback to incorporate is, town engagement needs to be called out explicitly. So whether that's the first subcommittee or the fourth might be natural places for that to fit. I think in the third bullet, reorganizing it so that it reads more like communications, including community outreach. I think what I heard, which makes sense to me. And then, maybe we should clean up the second bullet so that it reads a little bit more organized, if you will. And it's maybe master planning and financial feasibility, including goals, e.g. goal setting, ULI TAP program or something like that. Those were very clear to me. Is that kind of recap some of your suggestions, Linda?
Yes, in a much more concise way, thank you.
That's why I'm done.
So when we originally got your list, I had taken a stab at making this a little different, and here, I'm not saying this is perfect, but it kind of makes it in broader strokes. So it's a legal government affairs is one bucket. Under that are liaisons to state officials, committees, liaisons to town officials. Then the second group is land use planning and strategy, which would have under it local zoning, architecture and use, historic preservation. And then the third bucket would have been community outreach, which would have local outreach and PR marketing. If we went the sales partnership way, you know, trying to talk to people who might be interested in coming, or I guess even if we didn't go that way. So legal, land use, and community outreach.
Yeah, I was gonna second, like, can we combine these into three, was sort of where I was thinking we were.
I can send that if you.
Yeah,
I
that's
still
what
have
you meant.
that, yeah. I don't know if it's also helpful, like if you want me to send this one out in Word for people to try to edit before
Or you could send both.
Monday.
That, cause you had comments too.
Yeah,
You had-
I have those two, Linda.
No, and I very much appreciate the thinking that you put into the paragraphs, because the paragraphs matter. That's what helps theoretically deepen the understanding, and I don't know that I'd put that thought into it that you did, so.
And maybe this is to your point, maybe we're not there yet, but we can be that specific, you know, and then we just really need to do big buckets to start with.
Yeah, or, you know, you could easily imagine, I don't want to create work for us, but you could easily imagine us spending time at the board and a bunch of stickies and put them up there and for our world. Because I think that process would get us all on the same page potentially in terms of what we're bringing to it, because we're all bringing, this is the good news, we're all bringing this different stuff.
Right.
The challenge is, you know, how do we speak with the same language?
I think that's
How to
right.
share language.
Right, I think that's how I was thinking about it. You have like here the zoning and land use is your thing, right? And then, you know, we have the legal, which I'm gonna point at you, but you know, and then there's, it might help us organize our expertise a little bit as well.
So is there a way to do that, when we're outside this room in an effective way? Is that, do you think, Shannon, by sharing the documents that allows us to begin? I'm throwing that out to everybody then.
I mean, I can, if people send comments back in red line, I can do my best at consolidating those in a way that I think is in alignment.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
If that's not. Put two buildings.
Maybe just to do like another minute of problem solving, given that's probably the fastest way to do it. Do we, what I'm hearing is a desire to get to something like 3 committees, given the small size of our advisory board. Is that right? Like that we should be less than 5 so that they're not kind of by default 2-person subcommittees as a guiding principle?
That's what I heard, and that's what I'm seeing with head nodding.
Yeah, and I think there's just enough overlap here between the groups that further breaking them down might make them less effective.
Yeah.
At least
Okay.
maybe eventually we want.
Do we-
to more here.
So, do we like the 3 buckets that were just suggested? I think I caught legal and government affairs, land use, planning and strategy, and maybe I would add communications and community engagement to incorporate Linda's feedback.
I like that too.
And then the project management, scheduling, rapid response, that could be the purview of the chairs.
That's what I was thinking.
I like that too.
Yeah, I was wondering that too, Linda. I mean, if I had to pick a bucket, it feels like land use planning and strategy, or maybe it's called strategy and land use planning for that reason.
When you say that, you're
That's kind of where like master planning would sit.
Yeah. I had land use planning strategy, I had the technical assistance, the tab under that. I just sent you again what I had. But also historic preservation under that, which is your thing too, Linda, right?
So are we at
This is not
communication
my
and
thing.
community outreach?
yes, communication and community outreach. I heard legal government affairs, land use planning and strategy master plan, and communication.
If we're thinking about like sort of imminent categories we might need to respond to, like sort of. I can't keep going back to like sort of the existing state of the land, and yes, we have a long fuse here, but is like there's gonna be a ton of questions on like, what are we doing in the interim with the land? Is it gonna sit there and continue to deteriorate, right? Like, where do you think that would fall? Would that be land use and planning? Probably, right? I guess it's DCAM for the next year and then, but
And you're gonna get,
then what?
you're gonna get feedback like we have with the community.
Yeah. Okay.
But I should let you, we should let you respond to Lise. Do you have an idea of where that would land?
I
That's a
know,
great
I mean,
question.
land use planning, I guess, and I guess there's like, there's the short term and the long term, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah,
Because I just see it, at least for the next year, I see whatever information that we're working on is coming directly from the state.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think the framing of
We can
timeline
report out on.
is, which is related closely to the project management is an important early task, even if that timeline isn't very well in focus at the moment and just represents a, this is likely to happen before that's gonna happen, but we don't know how long it's gonna take.
Scott.
It'd be really helpful if we can get from DCAM, I'll have to share it, it's sort of their timeline of consulting retainage. Because they might be going out right now for certain types of, surveys, building evaluations, visioning, market analysis, or whatever they're going out for. Their meetings, when they're thinking about the meetings, if we can get information from DCAM about their, year-long, 2-year-long. Master schedule, then we can start plugging in our stuff to theirs. Because if they're going off doing visioning right away in fall, and we're hiring a visionary person in February, we're not on the same page.
Right.
So I don't know if they'd be willing to share that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think the fundamental question is, DCAM in fact doing visioning? Or are they relying upon us to do that? I don't know the answer to that.
And what I've heard so far is they're sort of neutral on that.
Well, we could raise our hand and say, we
Yeah,
could try that.
I think there's a distinct desire, I go a little further, there's a distinct desire for us, from them to have us doing that, because they want whatever the disposition is to be well accepted.
If they're gonna hire, we'll do the visioning maybe and provide the input, but they're the ones hiring the master planning consultants and
Well, no, we have funds, we have funds for that. We have funds for that.
Yeah, we're hiring.
We have funds.
We're hiring the master planning architect,
We could,
and they're not doing
We don't know.
we don't know, we haven't made that decision yet, but it's available to us as
it.
an
I
option.
heard that they were going forward. Okay. This is the information.
They're developing
And
an RFP for a consultant that has some scope in there, but
That's
how
what,
that dovetails with what we do is still open.
so that goes back to the timing, when's that person coming
Yeah.
on board, what's their scope?
I expect we will hear something about that. Yeah. Patrick?
Just in the spirit of trying to kind of close this off for today, maybe. Our 3 committees, legal, land use and community engagement, communications and community, the last 2 I can like envision pretty clearly, and they seem both very meaty, right, in terms of their scope. Can someone articulate what they think is in legal and government affairs, and does it feel equal in weight, and does the timing line up? I'm just thinking about kind of making sure that like our committee is well allocated across the subcommittees.
To me, that was the communication we were talking about with DCAM, Representative Cataldo's office, all of that. So I think that's pretty important to get going right away
And distinct,
and
distinct from the community outreach.
Yes, and
Yes, right,
distinct.
yeah.
And would that also be a relationship with the town and consultants and RFPs and?
I don't know about the RFPs or if that would go back, I mean, it depends on what it is, I guess, but there is gonna be a time, you're right, when it crosses over, because the money is gonna come from the town, is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, I mean, a town has the infrastructure set up to do that kind of work, and would the town be doing that, or
Well,
would we?
Interestingly to me, I think the town part of this is premature. I actually think more important on that legal government affairs is the state, and what they're doing and the deal, so. When looking at your town thing, I actually, what we had talked about, I mean, it's kind of premature, so I don't know, open question for me, but I think most important, getting to the state. And
Right,
having one communication with them.
yeah, I mean, I think the next, once we get these set up, the next thing would be to really determine the priorities. And I assume that's what the committee would be doing for the subcommittees, is establishing what are the key
Yeah,
things.
yeah, I think it's just to get you started with your big.
Yeah, to me, that goal setting is gonna be huge on that. I mean, that's theoretically should be our marching order, so how we make decisions. Patrick, did you were you done with your thoughts? Or questions?
It sounds like we're aligned on, it sounds like this, will go with this as a draft, right, for our 3, and, I guess as next steps, I would suggest, but would welcome folks, feedback, or if people want to raise their hands now, frankly, that's probably the fastest way, but like, we, as a next step, right, we'd want to have folks align to break up our advisory board across these, 3 committees in kind of equal weighting, presumably. And then for who's ever going to align against them to start to, charter out, if you will, the scope of each of the committees, subcommittees, I should say, right?
All right, so between now and Monday, can I restate what you just said?
Please.
So between now and Monday, we can send out a revised draft, you and I, to get it to Shannon, that she can then distribute along with the other one if it's of use. And then people will start to pick which things they think they might want to be involved in. And then potentially even start to brainstorm about what are the individual charters or the primary concerns of those. So
That's right. And then, I think that should be, on the agenda item for our next meeting, right, is to look at who's on what committee and, review and discuss preliminary, scopes, charters for each of the 3 subcommittees.
That's
to make sure.
Yeah, that's a great segue. We're just, and we're running out of time. I'm just, before we go, well, go ahead.
I just want one thing, I'm sorry, it's on this episode, total tangent. I look at our charter, and then I look at what we talked about today, and I think one thing that's missing is collaboration or integration with DCAM. It's all about, I don't know if that's even necessary, because it's, I think,
You mean you'd like to see that added to the agenda?
because right now, we're just saying we're advising the select board
Yeah.
on the most effective strategies, but we're doing it in collaboration. I wanna synergize our 2 groups. Is that?
Yeah. And do you think that the bi-weekly meetings as a means to try to ensure that, or is that?
No, just more of the wording of our charter.
Okay.
It was just more of a getting the word collaboration or integration, so it just sounds like we're. It's it.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you, Scott. So, do we have any people left on the, in the public that want to have public comment? No hands, okay. So our next meeting, just to remind people, so we just recap what we're gonna be trying to do between now and Monday. Our next meeting is on Monday, same time, same place. Patrick, are you scheduled to be in town?
Yeah, I should be.
Okay, good. Not to put you on the spot, even though I just did. I'm sorry. Okay, I believe I am in town too. So, all right, I would entertain a motion for. Please.
All right.
Thank you all.